Hi, welcome to Classical Grooming. Today we're going to talk about Quorum and its flankers by Antonio Puig. So I thought we'd start off with the first flanker, which is Aqua Quorum. It was introduced in 1994, and it's presented to have the notes of lavender and freesia, amber, geranium, and grapefruit, and oak moss. Let's give that a spray here. When it first comes off, you can certainly smell the lavender. It's pretty nice. There's a sweetness to it, probably the grapefruit note, although it smells citrusy, but I wouldn't say grapefruit. And it's mostly lavender and grapefruit on the opening, which was very pleasant. As it dries down, it tends to move more towards a geranium forward fragrance. And then eventually something, they call it oak moss. To me, it smells more like a little bit of a dusty leather. It's kind of mossy, but more of a dusty leather. And it lasts on my skin from 4 to 6 hours. And it's pleasant. Now that I've had this, here the geranium's just starting to come forward and it's dried down some. It is something I would see people could easily wear in the summer, or it's probably a spring, summer, fall fragrance. It's very casual, not something you necessarily wear a suit with, but you can pull it off if you wanted to. It's not what I call, again, a formal fragrance, but it could be used in a formal setting because it has that mossy or leathery note underneath it. So that'll be the end of what I'm going to call the objective review of Aqua Quorum. I'd like to share my feelings about the whole thing toward the end of the video. Next up is Quorum Silver, which is by far the more recent of the Quorum flankers. It came out in 2005, and it reports to have ginger, lavender, mandarin, artemisia, bergamot, and cardamom at the top. Pepper and nutmeg and cinnamon in the middle, and gaiac wood, patchouli, amber, and cedar wood at the base. So let's go ahead and spray some of this on here. In the opening, I get cardamom, something sort of akin to ginger, and woods. I think that's what they're calling the gaiac wood. It's kind of an oily, smoky sort of wood to it. So I've worn this before, and as it dries, it loses the top notes, the ginger and the cardamom, and moves more towards a woody note. People say that it's a very strong cedar wood smell. I don't get that. It's woody. It's kind of a peppery wood scent to it, which is not what I think of when I think of cedar. And if you like a generic woody fragrance, it's going to fit the bill. It lasts for about 8 hours. It projects pretty well. All the Quorums project pretty well. They don't really get into a skin set until the last half. So if this lasts 7 hours, it'd be 3.5 hours of pretty good projection, at least on my skin to my nose. I'm not picking up any cinnamon. Maybe a little nutmeg. Very peppery, very woody. It, again, doesn't strike me as a formal fragrance. It seems to be pretty casual. Something you could wear around the office if you want. It's not going to be in anybody's face. And that's my objective review of Quorum Silver. Now we're going to get to the original Quorum. So Quorum came out in 1984. Some people have labeled it as sort of an Aramis, I don't want to say rip-off, but an Aramis-inspired fragrance. Let's go ahead and give this a spray. I like the opening a lot. So the opening is supposed to have on the top. So on the top it's supposed to be bergamot, artemisia, cumin, lemon, and grapefruit. In the heart you have patchouli, jasmine, pine, sandal. So that's supposed to be sandalwood, cyclamen, and carnation. And in the bottom you have leather, tobacco, moss, amber, and albanium. I really like the opening. I did a review on Pinard Clubman's Special Reserve, and in that review I thought that I said that it reminds me of British Sterling. That aftershave is nearly identical to the opening of Quorum, and it's really enjoyable. You get a mixture of citrus and leather and tobacco and carnation and patchouli, and it all mixes together to be very rich, very masculine, very 70s, 80s inspired masculine perfumery. So the opening for me lasts for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then it dries down into a still greenish, but more, after a while it dries down into a kind of a greenish scent, but then the leather really becomes more pronounced, and to me it's kind of a dusty leather, like aged leather with moss and other green aspects, tobacco, and that's where things kind of go south with me. In the dry down, that dusty leather with the tobacco, they kind of come together and they give me the impression, at least to my nose, on my skin, of cigarette ash. And that cigarette ash tends to, I don't want to say mask, but it tends to distract me from all the other things that are going on in the fragrance, to the point that I'm not really enjoying it after that first hour and a half, 2 hours. It's still strong, it's still projecting, and it's still not bad. It just, to my nose, is not good. And that's leading to kind of the subjective review of the Quorum fragrances. So for Aqua Quorum, the opening is fair. I'd give it a score of 6, and the dry down is kind of meh for me, so I'd give it a 4 out of 10. Quorum Silver, the opening is again fair. I'd give that a 6, and the dry down's about a 4. Again, very not interesting to me. And Quorum, for the opening, I give that an 8. I love the opening, it's great. But the dry down goes down to about a 4. Each one of these fragrances tends to lose its focus, its function in the dry down for me. And I don't know if it's just because it's an inexpensive fragrance, or if it's been reformulated down to nothing, or that's the way it's always been. It's hard to tell with a vintage fragrance that lasts as long as it's had, that has lasted as long as it has, and been as reformulated as these fragrances have been. I understand that the Quorum original, the vintage versions smell a lot better, and I can certainly believe that. I have a hard time thinking that as they are now that they would have been as big of a seller as they were given their current dry down, because honestly, as we all know, it's the dry down's the important part. It's the longest part of the fragrance. It's the part that tends to resonate and remain with you for the experience of the day. So yeah, Quorum has a place in our fragrance history. I think it needs to be respected for being kind of one of those standout scents of the 80s. It is. It's just that for me personally, I don't like it. It's not that I hate it, but there's so many other things that I'd rather wear that I think I will. So that's my review of Quorum and its flankers. I hope that you find this useful. Again, this is my opinion according to my personal taste and sense of smell. I would encourage you to take them for a try and see if they work for you. Thank you very much for stopping by, and I'll see you next time.